Long before Ghana became a symbol of independence and resilience in Africa, a powerful kingdom called the Ashanti rose from the dense forests of West Africa. But between 1823 and 1900, their destiny clashed with the world's most powerful empire, the British. This is the untold story of the Anglo-Ashanti Wars, a series of brutal conflicts, betrayals, and battles that shaped the future of the Gold Coast forever. Deep in the West African forests, a kingdom was born that would challenge the world's most powerful empire. Nestled in what is now modern-day Ghana, the Ashanti Kingdom was founded in the 17th century by Osei Tutu and his spiritual advisor, Okomfo Anoke, who unified the fragmented Akan clans under their leadership. Their vision gave birth to the Ashanti Confederacy, where unity was symbolized by the legendary Golden Stool, said to have descended from the heavens into Osei Tutu's lap. More than just a throne, it embodied the very soul of the Ashanti people, symbolizing their identity, strength, and destiny. As the kingdom grew, so did its capital, Kumasi. What began as a modest settlement transformed into a bustling city of trade and culture. Its vibrant markets overflowed with gold, kola nuts, and textiles. The air buzzed with merchants' voices, while the scent of spices and the gleam of gold filled the streets. Kumasi wasn't just an economic hub, it was the spiritual heart of the kingdom. The palace complex, adorned with intricate carvings and colorful murals, stood as a testament to Ashanti artistry and cultural pride. A Danish trader named Wilhelm Miller noted in 1700 that their palaces were cooler than our stone forts, their walls adorned with wisdom older than scripture. Festivals, ceremonies, and reverence for ancestors kept traditions alive. Central to Ashanti power was its military strength. Far from being a scattered militia, the Ashanti army was a disciplined force, led by skilled generals known as Amanhane. They used Dane guns and flintlocks alongside innovative battle tactics was calculated, swift and deadly. By the 1700s and early 1800s, the Ashanti's military dominance and wealth made them the most powerful force in the region. But this power brought challenges. As their influence expanded to coastal trade centers like Elmina and Cape Coast, tensions grew with European powers, especially the British. The British, seeking control over the lucrative gold and slave trades, were no longer content with being just traders. They aimed to expand their empire under the banner of civilization and commerce. The stage was set. Two worlds were on a collision course, the proud defiant Ashanti Kingdom and the expanding British Empire. Little did either side know, the conflicts that lay ahead would stretch nearly a century, leaving behind a legacy of resistance, tragedy, and unforgettable heroism. The first real test of this growing friction came with the arrival of Sir Charles Macarthy, the British governor appointed to the Gold Coast in 1821. Macarthy arrived with supreme confidence and a clear mission to reshape the region according to British interests. He viewed the Ashanti as just another obstacle to British control of the lucrative Gold Coast trade routes. The governor was described as brash and dismissive, believing their governance and military capabilities were inferior. He dismissed Ashanti military capabilities, writing, "A disciplined European force will scatter these naked warriors like chaff." Trade disputes had been simmering for years between the British and Ashanti. The Ashanti were expanding their influence toward coastal trading centers, while the British desperately wanted to control these same routes. Both sides claimed authority over the Fante people who lived between them. Macarthy saw this conflict as his chance to establish British dominance once and for all. He believed the Ashanti were merely blustering and that a few volleys would scatter them. But the Ashanti weren't your typical kingdom. They had something Macarthy never expected to face in the African interior. Their military was a sophisticated force of around 10,000 warriors armed with muskets, swords, bows, and spears. The Ashanti had spent decades perfecting their military tactics and creating effective supply chains. They used talking drums to coordinate troop movements across vast distances. Their elite units combined traditional weapons with captured European firearms in ways that maximized their effectiveness in forest warfare. When ammunition ran low, Ashanti marksmen fired improvised charges of nails and metal shards with deadly effect. Macarthy marched inland with his forces in early 1824, completely unaware of what awaited him. The British governor led his troops toward the Pra River, confident that European military superiority would carry the day. The Ashanti had been tracking his movements and preparing their response. 10,000 Ashanti warriors positioned themselves in the dense forests along McCarthy's route, ready to spring their trap. On January 22, 1824, McCarthy's army walked straight into what would become known as the Battle of Nsamankow. The British forces found themselves lured into a narrow forest path where visibility was limited and maneuvering was nearly impossible. The Ashanti warriors emerged from the forest like ghosts, surrounding the British forces with precision that shocked European military observers. Hidden marksmen targeted British officers from concealed positions in the dense foliage. The attack created immediate chaos and confusion among the British ranks. McCarthy fell in the initial volleys, struck down by Ashanti marksmen who had specifically targeted him as the commanding officer. Ensign Wetherell tried desperately to defend McCarthy's body, but was also killed in the fierce fighting. The Fante allies, who had initially supported the British, fled the scene, leaving the remaining troops to face the full force of Ashanti warriors alone. What happened next sent shockwaves through the British Empire and changed everything about how Europeans viewed African military power. The Ashanti took McCarthy's head as a trophy, along with Ensign Wetherell's. This symbolic act of victory demonstrated their complete triumph over the supposedly superior British forces. The mighty British army suffered a crushing defeat that forced them to retreat all the way to Sierra Leone by 1828. This devastating loss should have taught the British a hard lesson about underestimating their opponents. But decades later, old tensions would resurface in ways nobody expected. The Pra River became the flashpoint for renewed conflict in 1863. This waterway had served as the official boundary between British protected territories and the mighty Ashanti Empire for decades. Both sides respected this border, but everything changed when a fugitive named Queen Yaa crossed into British territory. The Second Anglo-Ashanti War erupted when a large Ashanti force crossed the forbidden Pra River in pursuit of this fugitive. This wasn't just any chase. The Ashanti viewed Ya's escape as a direct challenge to their authority, while the British saw the river crossing as a violation of existing peace agreements. Neither side was willing to back down from this confrontation. This time, both sides brought everything they had to the battlefield. The British assembled forces that included not just European soldiers, but also African troops and Indian regiments. They had learned from McCarthy's devastating defeat and came prepared for serious warfare. The Ashanti, meanwhile, mobilized their experienced warriors who had already proven they could embarrass the world's most powerful empire. These weren't untrained fighters. They were battle-tested veterans who knew exactly how deadly they could be. But there was a silent killer stoking both armies that proved more deadly than any sword or rifle. The West African environment became a battlefield where no military strategy could guarantee victory. Disease swept through the ranks of both armies like invisible assassins, striking down soldiers without warning. Malaria crept through the camps, while yellow fever followed close behind, turning strong warriors into helpless victims within days. More soldiers were dying from illness than from actual combat wounds. British medical officers watched helplessly as their troops fell victim to tropical diseases they barely understood. The Ashanti, despite their knowledge of local remedies and their adaptation to the climate, also suffered massive casualties from these same illnesses. Neither the British technology nor Ashanti knowledge of the terrain could overcome this invisible foe. European medical knowledge was limited when it came to tropical diseases, while traditional Ashanti treatments couldn't save everyone from the epidemic. Both armies found themselves fighting a war they couldn't win against an enemy they couldn't defeat. The war dragged on through 1864, with neither side able to claim a decisive victory. Every battle was followed by days of treating the sick and burying the dead. Military leaders on both sides realized they were fighting a losing battle against disease rather than each other. By 1864, the conflict ended in stalemate, with both sides pulling back across the Pra River, none able to claim decisive victory against disease and each other. This stalemate demonstrated that British military superiority meant nothing when disease could level the playing field. But the British weren't finished. They would return with something that would change everything. By 1873, The British had learned a harsh lesson about underestimating the Ashanti, so they brought something that would change warfare forever. The War Office in London decided they needed a completely different approach. Gone were the days of sending unprepared governors like McCarthy into the African interior with basic equipment and overconfidence. General Garnet Wolseley arrived on the Gold Coast with a mission to end Ashanti resistance once and for all. This wasn't just any military leader. Wolseley was known for his careful planning and modern tactics. He brought better trained soldiers who understood tropical warfare. More importantly, he carried quinine to fight the diseases that had devastated previous British campaigns. With daily quinine, British soldiers suffered fewer fevers that had previously decimated entire units. But his most game-changing innovation was new breech-loading rifles and Congreve rockets that no African army had ever encountered. The Ashanti still had their sophisticated urban planning in Kumasi, their deep knowledge of the terrain, and their proven military strategies that had embarrassed British forces for decades. Their warriors remained fierce and determined. Their commanders like Amankwatiya were experienced tacticians who knew how to use the forest environment to their advantage. They had every reason to believe they could repeat their earlier victories against European invaders. But these new British weapons represented a technological revolution that changed everything about battlefield tactics. The breech-loading rifles could fire faster and more accurately than anything the Ashanti had faced. The Congreve rockets created explosive devastation that traditional warfare couldn't match. Imagine facing an enemy with weapons that could strike from distances your own forces couldn't reach. Wolseley spent months preparing his advance with meticulous planning. He constructed roads to move his troops efficiently through the challenging terrain. He established fortified camps along the route to Kumasi to secure his supply lines. This level of preparation was something previous British commanders had never attempted in West Africa. The Battle of Nsamankow on January 31, 1874, became the turning point that demonstrated the devastating power of this new technology. The Black Watch Regiment spearheaded the British advance, using bayonet charges to break through Ashanti defensive lines. Even facing such overwhelming firepower, the Ashanti warriors fought with incredible courage. After winning at Nsamankow, Wolseley himself wrote that he had never seen such spirited resistance. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical carnage. Ashanti warriors who had never retreated from battle found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't effectively fight. Their traditional tactics became useless against superior firepower. The advanced weapons of the British created gaps in the Ashanti's defensive lines, and the British infantry exploited this with deadly efficiency. Wolseley's forces pushed deeper into Ashanti territory than any European army had ever managed. Village after village fell as word spread about the unstoppable British advance. The unthinkable happened when British troops marched into Kumasi, the heart of the Ashanti Empire. They found a city more impressive than they had expected, with rows of books in many languages in the royal palace. The British destroyed the palace with explosives, sending a clear message about their intentions. The Treaty of Fomena in July 1874 forced the Ashanti to pay 50,000 ounces of gold and marked the beginning of the end of their independence. The treaty also demanded an end to human sacrifice and opened trade routes that had been exclusively Ashanti-controlled. Yet, even after this crushing defeat, the Ashanti spirit remained unbroken. Their most defiant stand was still ahead, and it would come from the most unexpected source. In 1900, a British governor made a demand so outrageous that it awakened a sleeping giant in the form of an elderly Queen Mother. Sir Frederick Hodgson had arrived in the Gold Coast with typical colonial arrogance, but his next move crossed a line that no Ashanti could ever accept. On March 25, 1900, he ordered a search for the Golden Stool, demanding to sit on the sacred symbol of Ashanti unity and spiritual power that embodied the very soul of their people. Imagine the shock that rippled through Ashanti society when this demand reached their ears. The Golden Stool wasn't just a throne or a piece of furniture. It was so sacred that even the Asantehene himself was forbidden from sitting on it. The stool represented the collective spirit of every Ashanti person who had ever lived. Hodgson's demand was like asking to desecrate their most holy shrine while spitting on the graves of their ancestors. A secret meeting was convened in Kumasi to discuss a response. In that meeting, the Ashanti men were hesitant to fight back against this ultimate insult. Noticing the hesitation and fear among some of the male chiefs, Queen Mother Yaa Asantewaa, a 60-year-old woman from Ejisu, stood before the assembled chiefs and delivered a speech that would ignite the final war. She rose and delivered a powerful indictment of their cowardice. How can a proud and brave people like the Ashanti sit back and look while white men took away their king and chiefs and humiliated them with a demand for the Golden Stool? The Golden Stool only means money to the white men. They have searched and dug everywhere for it. I shall not pay one empredwan to the governor. If you, the chiefs of Ashanti, are going to behave like cowards and not fight, you should exchange your loincloths for my undergarments. She declared that if the men would not fight for their sacred symbol, she would lead the resistance herself. To emphasize her determination to go to war, she seized a gun and fired a shot in front of the men, marking the beginning of the Ashanti battle with the British. Yaa Asantewaa's passionate plea, coupled with her strategic acumen, led to her unprecedented appointment as the war leader of the Ashanti forces. No woman had ever held such a position in Ashanti military history. But these weren't ordinary times. The gravity of the situation demanded extraordinary leadership, and Yaa Asantewaa commanded the respect needed to unite her people against this final colonial assault. She organizes brilliant military strategies that showed her deep understanding of warfare and terrain. Her warriors cut telegraph wires to isolate British communications. Using the Ashantis' intimate knowledge of their homeland, she set deadly ambushes that trapped British forces. She would lure the British into the dense forest where their artillery and machine guns had reduced efficacy. Her troops would then pick apart the British in non-conventional formation and engagement patterns, so much so that the remaining British forces, unable to face them in the field, had to retreat to the fort of Kumasi. The Ashanti forces under Yaa Asantewaa's leadership lay siege to the British fort at Kumasi. The siege demonstrated the military prowess of the Ashanti and the effectiveness of Yaa Asantewaa's leadership. The British, caught off guard by the ferocity of the resistance, were forced to send reinforcements to quell the rebellion. The War of the Golden Stool becomes the bloodiest of all 5 conflicts between these two powers. Over 2,000 Ashanti warriors died fighting for their sacred beliefs, while approximately 1,000 British troops perished trying to break their resistance. Both sides threw everything they had into this final confrontation, knowing that the outcome would determine the future of the Ashanti people forever. Yaa Asantewaa's forces held out for months, proving that even when facing impossible odds, the Ashanti will never surrender their dignity. Her leadership inspired a level of resistance that shocked British commanders who thought they had finally broken Ashanti power. The intensity of the fighting demonstrated that some things are worth dying for, regardless of the military odds. Despite their valiant efforts, the Ashanti were ultimately unable to overcome the superior firepower of the British forces. Yaa Asantewaa, along with 15 of her closest advisors, were exiled to the Seychelles, effectively ending the rebellion. Despite the British victory, the Golden Stool was never surrendered. A replica stool was presented to the British while the real one remained hidden. The true symbol of Ashanti independence remains free, hidden away where colonial hands can never touch it. The aftermath of the war saw the formal annexation of the Ashanti territories by the British in 1902, marking the end of the Ashanti Empire's independence and its incorporation into the British Gold Coast colony. The Ashanti lost their political independence, but their spirit of resistance planted seeds that will grow into something much greater. The Ashanti remained a proud nation and continued fighting for their independence. Kwame Nkrumah and other freedom fighters drew inspiration from the Ashanti's legacy of resistance, and on March 6, 1957, they eventually won their freedom. Ghana became the first African nation to gain full independence from European colonization. The Golden Stool eventually came out of hiding, and it now resides in the Royal Palace in Kumasi. If you found this story inspiring, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Please show support for our work by hitting the like button, and if you want to be notified whenever we drop new stories, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell so you never miss another tale of Africa's magnificent past. This is Histories Africa, where the forgotten power of the continent lives again.